Greetings and salutations, friends. By now I'm sure you've all heard the news about what's going on in Ukraine, so I figured I'd put on a suddenly very relevant video game, and we'll have a bit of a talk about it. What's happening, why it's happening, and what might be happening next, as this conflict can have some pretty major geopolitical implications. But before I begin, I just want to say that I wish the best of luck to all soldiers involved in this conflict on both sides. Because regardless of our opinions and our political standpoints, I do believe we can all agree that it is now the common soldier, the average fighting man, who is going to have to bear the burden of their nation continuing diplomacy by other means. And those soldiers deserve our respect and our sympathies. Hopefully, as many of them as possible will be able to get out of this alive. Now then, let's get into it, shall we? In the background here, for your amusement, I will be playing Combat Mission Black Sea, or Combat Mission Ukraine. Might be a more fitting name right now. It is a fairly advanced tactical level strategy game set in a hypothetical conflict between Ukraine and Russia in 2017. So it's a little while ago, but in terms of military technology, it might as well be yesterday, as the forces involved will be contemporary forces. I will be taking charge of the Ukrainians because, whilst all soldiers in this, frankly, rather pointless war are worthy of our respect, it is the Ukrainians currently getting invaded by a hostile foreign power. They're extra worthy of a bit of sympathy, in my opinion. The current military situation is difficult to discern, shall we say, as the fog of war lies heavy over Ukraine right now. But we do appear to have gotten the answer to one of the biggest and most important questions of this conflict. Before it all kicked off last night, by the point where I'm recording this video, the biggest question was, would Ukraine fight? Because back in 2014, of course, they did not offer resistance to the Russian invasion of Crimea. They were actively disarmed by Russian soldiers, and the Ukrainian political leadership were desperate to avoid a war at any cost. And that cost turned out to be a pretty hefty slice of their country. But the Ukrainian army of today is not the Ukrainian army of 2014. Nor is the political leadership the same either, and it appears, I will be using the word appears with frightening frequency in this video by the way, as it is very difficult to know anything for completely sure, that the Ukrainian army is fighting in a very determined and ferocious fashion. The only area in which the Russians appear to have made any serious gains right now is to the south, where large numbers of Russian forces have flooded out of the Crimean Peninsula and into Ukraine. This offensive, in turn, appears to be one out of at least 3 large-scale Russian thrusts currently ongoing. One from Crimea, as mentioned, one heading towards Kiev from Belarus, and one heading towards Kharkiv. There are also rumors of an amphibious invasion taking place against Odessa, and the Ukrainian army claims to have engaged and destroyed a large force of Russian armor near the city of Kharkiv. And now that the Ukrainian army has decided, it appears, to fight, the question is, can they fight? Does the Ukrainian army stand a chance against Russia? Yes. Yes, they do. The Ukrainian army, again, is not that of 2014. They have received tremendous amounts of foreign military aid, and their army is not at all helpless. Their main battle tank right now is a heavily upgraded and modified version of the Russian T-80. The Ukrainians call it the T-84, and it is a serious main battle tank, more than a match for the mainstay of the Russian army, which is going to be the heavily upgraded and modified T-72. It's probably not going to be able to stand up to the more hyper-modern T-90s, but Ukraine is not at all significantly inferior in main battle tanks. If anything, their primary weakness is going to come in the IFV area, where the Ukrainians are still relying primarily on the now long outdated BMP-2, which is going to have a very hard time when facing off against modern-day Russian BMP-3s, though the Ukrainians have also developed their own homegrown IFV, the BTR-4, which could potentially be a significant threat to the Russian IFVs. When it comes to infantry forces, the two are at de facto parity in terms of equipment. The Russians might have a slight advantage in night optics, suggested by their choice to launch the invasion in the middle of the night, and the Ukrainians might have a slight edge in anti-tank weaponry, as they have received loads and loads of American-made javelins. In terms of numbers, they are relatively even as well. The Russians are expected to have between 100 to 250,000 men. The Ukrainians are expected to have 250,000, with another 250,000 in reserve. But of course, with Russia being the one on the offensive, they are the ones who are going to get to pick and choose the battlefields. In short, at least as far as the ground forces are concerned, this is no walkover conflict by any stretch of the imagination. Though Russia is likely to have an advantage in artillery, and they are definitely going to have a significant advantage in the air, especially as Ukraine's anti-air weaponry are not excellent. They do have 6 batteries of the S-300s. They are still very capable anti-air weaponry. They also have an unknown number of the Russian Tor short-range AA missile systems, also a very excellent system. But beyond that, they have to rely on Cold War-era AA and AAA, which is going to have a very hard time dealing with Russian SEAD and Russian bombing attacks. Especially as Russia is also again expected to have a pretty significant advantage in terms of artillery, something they demonstrated a lot during the opening hours of the invasion, with some of the footage being... You can see why in every war book ever, a person looks at an artillery barrage and goes, nobody could have survived that. Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. And this was happening all over Ukraine, as Russia launched a massive blitz of precision ordnance, bombing runs, and artillery strikes, rocket strikes primarily, to try and knock out important Ukrainian command and control infrastructure. Judging by their relatively slow move into the country, they may have failed in this objective, but the next night will really be the one that tells just how effective the Russian invasion is going to be. We should also note that Russia has not yet committed all of the forces on the border. More than likely, they are waiting to see where and how the advanced elements are making the most progress and against the lightest resistance before committing those vast reserves. So, now that we've talked a bit about the military side of things, with many suppositions and barely educated guesses, I shan't lie, what about the political side of things? Why did this happen? How is it happening? And does it make any sense? Well, we know that Putin was initiating the conflict quite a while ago. Now, to me, it looked like Russia was doing what Russia so frequently does. It goes, "Rawr, big strong bear, rawr, give me things," trying to scare NATO, the EU, and America into concessions and to make Putin look strong by bullying the Western powers. This time around, however, he was met by pretty significant and vociferous verbal resistance, if nothing else, by the Western powers. Biden in particular was quite belligerent there for a while. And I believe that the decision to actually invade occurred because of this. I am basing this supposition on the fact that before all of that happened, Russia was carrying out large military-scale exercises in Belarusia. Now, if you're planning an invasion, you're not going to be carrying out military exercises because it's an enormous flag, or a huge red flag. Hey, I've got military over here. Hey, they're shooting. Hey, look at me. It's not what you're going to do when you're preparing for an invasion. But then, as the West's response grew more verbally aggressive, suddenly the Russian army grew very quiet. That was at the point I was about 70% sure nothing was going to happen. But the West didn't back down. And here's the thing, too. I'm not blaming the West for not backing down. We need to stand up to Russian aggression. We made a huge mistake in 2014 when we didn't, and we might be making an enormous mistake today if we don't make some serious moves against Russia quickly. We'll get to the current moves a bit later, but then the Russian army, again, as mentioned, went suddenly very, very silent. But the verbiage from the West did not decrease. This put Putin in an uncomfortable position. Putin's entire political power rests on him being the strong man of Russia, the man who rides bears, etc. If he is made to look weak and a fool by the West, his position is in a great deal of danger. And so he decided to recognize the two little independent republic things on Ukraine's border. That was the point I was about 50-50, whether or not it would be war. A coin toss at that point. Because I figured, okay, this is going to be a show of strength. Putin's going to march into these places and go, look, big strong bear, rawr, US, NATO flee, I am strong. But Putin decided to take it one step further again. And as I mentioned on Twitter as well, this is one of the reasons why Putin has been viewed as such a master of military brinksmanship, because he always seems to be willing to take just one more step. Whereas the West has proven time and time again that whilst we'll talk a big game, we tend to not back up our threats. See, for example, Obama in Syria with his red line of chemical weapons. They were apparently deployed and he did nothing. See 2014, where nothing was done. And now Biden is making a whole lot of noise, but he's not actually doing anything. As the recent response that came out just minutes before I'm recording this was that economic sanctions would be tightened, but Russia would not be banned from the SWIFT payment system. That is a huge mistake, in my opinion. There would be no deployment of military forces to fight in Ukraine. This was said definitively. Another huge mistake, in my opinion. And, well, we're just going to get another round of economic sanctions. I just don't think that's going to be deterring Russia. We've been trying that now for damn near 10 years. If it hasn't worked for the last 8, 9, 10 years, I don't know why we expect it to suddenly work now. Though, bear you in mind, there are some potential further implications, but as of right now, I am not liking the West's position on this. NATO has stated that it is authorizing the mobilizations of rapid reaction forces with no decision being made yet as to whether or not to deploy them to Ukraine. This is the correct move to make. Even if you have no plan of sending them, you need to pretend that you are ready to send them. Otherwise, you are giving carte blanche to the Russian army. China, as we know, has already prepared a very pro-Russia position, and they are undoubtedly watching this very, very closely. If the West does not, and this is the real danger, by the way, because the Ukrainian conflict will remain a local conflict. I'm 90% sure of that. NATO, I do not think, will go to war. They need to be looking like they're willing to, but I don't think it's going to happen. Definitely not without America. But the big danger here is China and Taiwan. If the West's reaction to this unprovoked military aggression is not strident and aggressive, and it needs to happen now, then China will see the West as weak, because we appear weak. And in terms of military and diplomacy, appearing weak is the exact same thing as being weak. And weakness is a provocation. Already, there have been reports of large numbers of Chinese military aircraft and warships beginning to enter Taiwanese territory, undoubtedly testing the waters to see if there is going to be some kind of reaction. And there needs to be. There absolutely needs to be. Taiwan is incredibly important to the West because if a conflict starts there, even if China has no realistic hope of winning it, because America will defend Taiwan, I hope. And if they won't, Japan probably will, because they know that if China is willing to attack Taiwan, they will be plenty happy to attack Japan as well. And more than likely, any military operation against Taiwan is going to require China to attack at the very least Okinawa as well, possibly even South Korea and the Japanese mainland, and possibly even Guam, to make sure that they aren't going to get hit by a massive Allied counterattack. Allied, you understand the term. That's the real danger, and it's a big one. Now, China might also decide to use this situation in a different way. Instead of war with Taiwan, it might decide to prop up its economy by outwardly adopting a very pro-Russian stance whilst looking at the Russian economy beginning to collapse. The Russian ruble right now is in a free fall, and it's going to be falling a lot further as well, with the current economic sanctions making it clear that they will make it very difficult for Russia to do trade in US dollars, pounds, or yens. That also means that they're going to have a very hard time trading in anything but the ruble. What do you think this means for China? Well, China is a huge industrial powerhouse that is struggling to get a hold of resources. Meanwhile, Russia has a huge amount of natural resources, but they might very soon be barred from foreign markets, or at the very least, they will have to trade at a ridiculous deficit if they have to trade in rubles. China might be the only market willing to deal with them. And they'll give Russia more than Europe, but it'll still be a fire sale as far as China is concerned. That might be very, very, very beneficial. And they might in fact hope that the conflict drags out so that they can bleed Russia dry financially over the course of years. And there's another implication too. I do believe that the Russian army is going to win this conflict. It is larger, it is better equipped overall, and it's going to have more special forces, more of the offensive elites. Though again, I wouldn't count Ukraine out, and right now they appear to be doing a sterling job of repelling Russian aggression. Appear to be, again, that is the key word right there. But even if Russia wins, they are now going to have to occupy the entirety of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian populace have not shown themselves particularly interested in being Russian citizens. It might even be an excellent opportunity for the West to flex some muscles against Russia by supplying Ukrainian separatists and various partisan groups. And as we've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq, guerrilla operations are damnably annoying for the occupying country. And with the amount of damage the occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq did to the American economy, much, much stronger than the Russian, you can imagine the damage it might do to Russia. See, this returns us to the point, is it a good idea to invade Ukraine? I really don't think so. I think Russia has very little to gain from an invasion, and they have an enormous amount of things to lose from such an invasion, depending again upon whether or not the EU, NATO, and the US can actually respond in a good and effective fashion. Germany should be cutting all trade with oil, gas, and energy with Russia almost immediately. They need to. Well, the problem is they can't. They are so reliant on Russian energy that they would completely screw themselves if they did, yet if we don't, we are going to remain at the mercy of Russia. So long as Germany is bound hand and foot to Russian energy, Putin can do practically whatever he wants, and the real threat of proper, functional economic sanctions are virtually non-existent. There's the difficulty too. What to do? If we can't go to war, and we probably can't, it will be very difficult to justify, although I do believe it might be a politically popular move right now. Economic sanctions are the only options, but the economic sanctions that will actually work are off the table because we're dependent upon Russia. We are in a very difficult position, and we'll see what the various political leaders come up with. Personally, I do believe that military action needs to be on the table. It has to be. If nothing else, right now, tomorrow, as soon as NATO meets, they need to slap a potential Ukrainian NATO membership on the board immediately and threaten Russia with expediting it and including them within weeks or months. Is it a hollow threat? Honestly, it very well might be, but it's better than nothing. And finally, a bit of criticism for the Republicans as well here, because Biden is not a strong leader. And no matter how loud he barks, he will not be perceived as a strong leader. I'm not going to go so far as to say that this couldn't have happened on Trump. It probably could have, but the odds would have been a great deal less because Trump is seen as a bit of a madman, and nobody quite knows how far he's willing to go, and that is vital in military diplomacy like this. You need to be perceived as the crazy person that will do anything. If your opponent takes one step, you have to be perceived to be willing to take 2 steps in response. And that is exactly what Putin have done here. But Trump has been saying some very, very dumb things surrounding this conflict, praising the entrance of Russian peacekeeping forces into the Ukraine separatist little republics. This was before the invasion, mind you, but nevertheless, it was a very dumb thing to say. And the Republicans need to get aboard the Ukraine train now. No more pro-Russia nonsense, no more apologia. They need to condemn Russia wholeheartedly, and they need to rally. They don't need to endorse Biden. They can attack Biden all they want. They just simply can't be pro-Russia. For, again, rather obvious reasons. Anywho, I'll wrap it up there. Hopefully, it's been interesting to hear me ramble on about this. I do love my military, as I'm sure you know, and this is a fascinating situation, militarily and geopolitically, and I very much so hope the conflict will wrap up quickly though, because whilst it might be interesting, it's also extraordinarily dangerous on so many levels, and a lot of people are going to get injured, hurt, and unfortunately killed due to, well, one man essentially flexing his political muscles. The only good war, as they say, is a quick war. So let's hope it wraps up soon. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon, hopefully with a cheerier topic. Have a good day.